Jordan Peterson was on the Megyn Kelly show, which I watch occasionally. And I also have followed Jordan Peterson. I think he has a positive message for young men. Whatever you think about that, he was parodied in that god-awful Olivia Wilde movie about which turned into a movie about incels. It was terrible film. And one of the characters that Chris Pine played was based on Jordan Peterson, but clearly Olivia Wilde had no idea what Jordan Peterson was truly all about. And it was clear from the junket. And even Chris Pine once learned about that. He wasn't even aware that he was supposed to be a Jordan Peterson-like figure, and kind of said, oh, well, I checked out Jordan Peterson. I think he's actually pretty good. So he talked about that in this interview, but also he discusses Snow White. He had comments on Snow White, and it's a couple minutes. I'm going to play this clip, and Alan, I'd love for you to comment on.
I've not seen this.
Okay, here we go.
That are toxically masculine. And look, here's an example. So, Disney just nose planted remarkably with Snow White. And so in the original Grimm's fairy tale, which is a very, very old story, right? Because Grimm gathered these stories. We have no idea how old they are. There's indication that some of our folk tales are 15,000 years old. They're really old, and you can't mess with them because they have a logic. Okay, so now you might ask yourself, well, why does Snow White have to run away from the evil queen? Who's the evil queen? Well, in the Grimm's fairy tale, the evil queen puts Snow White in a bodice that's so tight she can't breathe. So that pathologizes her sexuality. And then she gives her a comb that poisons her, because that's the temptation towards narcissism. And then she feeds her a poisoned apple, which is exactly what the harpy ideologues are doing to young women to destabilize their identity and to push them off the reproductive tract. And so, both of those interpretations work, by the way. And so that's the evil queen. Okay, now when Snow White runs away from the evil queen, where does she go to get her act together? Well, she goes to live among the dwarfs. And who are the dwarfs? They're hardworking, orderly, responsible, ordinary men who keep a clean house. And she learns to be appreciative of their ability to protect her from the evil queen. And so she grows up, and then she can find a prince. Right. And these are the sorts of stories that I'm telling people. And when I tell them, they understand, because the stories make sense. Like everything I said there is immediately comprehensible, right? You think, oh, yes, obviously. Right.
And
well, it's not so obvious. Apparently controversial enough so that Disney would rewrite the entire story and spend $250 million plus $150 billion on marketing to make a dull mess, right? And sink their damn company. And that's just one indication of how absolutely messed up we are. Now that movie, I went and saw it. It could have been a lot worse than it was. They reverted back to the dwarfs, and not exactly accurately, but it was still basically a feminist revolutionary screed. And even that could have been interesting, although it wasn't. And the evil queen wasn't particularly evil, but the evil queen that's teaching women right now is particularly evil. And she's already made 1/4 of them. She's already knocked 1/4 of them off the reproductive pathway. 1 in 4. 1 in 4. And so that's a complete catastrophe. And so, Olivia Wilde,
he goes on to talk about the Olivia Wilde situation and him being lampooned in her awful movie that we reviewed when it came out. And it was bad. But what do you think about this, Alan? I guess I should play Jordan Peterson at double speed.
Yeah, probably.
He's a slow, intentional talker. He likes to use, big words I like to speak plainly about these things.
Yeah, he's a
But,
clinical psychologist. That's
yeah, just I wasn't aware that some of these fairy tales are thousands of years old. And there's a reason that they've survived thousands of years because they resonate to something primal in our lizard brain. And it's not easy to undo that, but it just I don't know. I just I do like hearing him speak about this stuff. What are your comments? And then I've got another story related to Snow White. You believe it or
yeah.
not.
Yeah, I mean, I could speak to I because I started listening to all you guys. That's what got me onto Jordan Peterson, and I think he's very practical. Just a common sense look at the differences between men and women, roles like that, and I think he's spot on here because the problem with Disney over the last few years is the fact that, and I wrote an article about this, ironically, back in 2018. About woke Disney, the idea that we need to see Walt Disney's classics reframed in a new perspective, and that perspective is being woke, and that's exactly what's happening. What hopefully Snow White is the culmination of all that,
Right.
because we need to these old tales that old white men had written long ago. Do not resonate with the modern audience. When reality is that they do. And I think it's kind of when you start going back and looking at the old classics, I want to believe that there's going to be kind of a reverse woke where everyone says, hey, I just saw the Rachel Zegler Snow White. Let's look at the original. And you see what rich storytelling you had then, not only with Walt Disney, but going back to the Grimm's Tale. And the fact that storytelling has not progressed, it has regressed. Because when you have them discussing Grimm in a way that, the narcissism of beauty, when he describes each element of Snow White, you realize that was storytelling. He says 15,000 years ago. I think he means 1,500 years ago. It's weird because this is what people just can't get a hold of, is that there was a time where human beings told great stories, and we refused to look back, study them, and say, how can I make my story today better? What are the elements that made great stories back then that I can infuse in my story and make my story great for today and the future? And that's my thoughts on Jordan Peterson here.